Hey everyone, welcome to my first YouTube podcast. My name is Andrea of Alu Knits on Instagram. You might have found me through my Instagram or just here on YouTube. If you know me, you probably know me from my Maker Self-Care Reels that I release on Instagram every Friday. I started doing them earlier this year in late January of 2021, and I've just been really enjoying putting it out there. I've been really enjoying sharing my expertise and my knowledge with everyone and helping everyone to craft pain-free or to craft with less pain. My background is I am an orthopedic physical therapist in the United States. What that means is I work as a physical therapist in an outpatient setting. I see people with any number of injuries ranging from chronic neck pain, back pain, sports injuries, post-ops like after a knee after a knee replacement or after ACL tears, anything like that, anything related to kind of bones and muscles. That's what I see. And I've been practicing this field for about 7 to 8 years now. I really enjoy and I really love it. And I'm really excited to have this year figured out a way to kind of marry my passion for knitting and crocheting together with what I do as a physical therapist. So if you're here, welcome. I started this podcast because I was starting to feel like that I wasn't connecting with a lot of you out there, besides just through your comments on my reels and whatnot. My reels are silent, mainly because I get just really distracted by myself talking, and I also like to browse Instagram without my volume on. A lot of times I'm browsing either when my kids are napping, or it used to be when I was breastfeeding. So of course I didn't want the sound on to distract my kids. And I really loved when people would have captions on their reels or their videos, so then I didn't need to turn my volume up. And so that's why my reels are silent and just caption based only. And I find that it's been working really well. It makes them really accessible for everyone. So I hope you've been enjoying that as well too. And so I decided to make this podcast because I wanted to connect more with all of you. I have a Patreon where my subscribers get weekly exercise videos, and I also make videos where I talk about certain conditions. And I realized that maybe only my Patreon subscribers were getting to kind of know me as a creator and as an artist and as a person through the monthly live streams that we do, but that people who weren't subscribers weren't really getting to know me as well, and I wasn't getting to know you as well. So hopefully through this podcast format on YouTube, we will get to know each other better. And so what we're going to do with this podcast is kind of like the usual knitting things. I'll kind of show you my whips, show you my FOs, talk to you about maybe new yarn I've got or new yarn accessories I've got. But the one thing I do want to share with each episode is what I'm going to call a wellness tip. And so those will just be like, small tidbits of information that I'll put out there to share with you, that you can hopefully apply to make your crafting healthier and more pain-free for yourself. So let's get started. The topic for today is just an introduction to me, which we kind of did. And I wanted to talk to you about one of my goals for 2021. And so we'll get to that. So first, I'm going to show you my whips. And I'm feeling like I have a lot right now. I used to be a completely monogamous knitter. But that changed kind of with 2019, 2020, and now I have more whips than I feel like I can handle, but we'll get into it. I know it's probably a small amount compared to a lot of people out there. So one of my whips is the Rift pullover. Here it is. It's a bottom-up sweater. I am making this for my husband. We will have been married for 10 years at the end of this month. So I started this back in February with the idea that it would be done in time for our anniversary, but it clearly will not be because I got distracted with a lot of other things. But also, I live in Austin, Texas, and it is super hot. You probably notice I'm like a little shiny and sweaty right now. And, I decided, as long as it's done by the end of the year when it is again cold enough in Texas to wear a sweater, that's good enough for me. And my husband doesn't mind either. So yeah, this is the Rift pullover. It's knit from the bottom up. You can see it's a pretty basic stockinette sweater, but it does have this nice detailing, this pearl detailing on the sides of the body. And so I'll knit until, I think right now I'm starting the shaping before I split for the front and the back of the body, and it has set-in sleeves as well. I'm not quite looking forward to that part, but yeah. And the yarn this is in Dream in Color Classy, which is their worsted base. Yes, and the color of this is Black Pearl, for anyone wondering. So that's one whip I've got. The second whip I've got is a pair of socks. So I used to be a really big sock knitter, fun fact. Recently I've been more into sweaters. So this is a pair of socks. I've had them on the needles for since the beginning of the year too. It's using Madeline Tosh sock and the colorway Sugar Plum, which I believe it just is discontinued now. I'm going to flip inside. So this pair of socks is called a Garia, is the pattern Garia, I don't know how to say it. And you can see it's got this beautiful knit stitch detail running up with a purl stitch background. You actually knit these inside out so that you're not like purling a ton, which is really nice. I am making these for my mom. Hoping to have these done by the end of the year too. And the Garia socks pattern is from the book 52 Weeks of Socks by, is it Lana magazine? I also don't know how to say this, but it's an absolute beautiful book, full of 52 patterns from a number of different designers. So the Garia is from here. Another whip I've got is the Summer Sorrel Tee by Wool and Pine Designs. So you can see it's got the dip stitch detail, which hopefully I can kind of show here. There. I'm really enjoying this. The yarn is by Yarn Love in the color Chevron Chalet. It is her BFL fingering base. And I'll show you kind of a picture of, did I print out? Yeah, a picture of kind of what it looks like. Try to cover up some of the details on here. Okay, yeah. So I am just finishing up like the second chart of 3 for the yoke. So hopefully maybe in a week or so I'll have the yoke done and I can move on to the body. My fourth whip is the Sun and Solace Tee by Tina St. Knits. I love her designs. I knit her wavelength design earlier in the year and I absolutely loved it. And I have many plans to knit many for other patterns as well, including some that are coming out soon. So this one is knit and knit bottom up, and then you separate for shoulders, and then there's a short sleeve option too. But I love the kind of mosaic and slip stitch design on this. And the yarn for this is the MC is by the Red Pansy. This is her Monet Impressionisms Club, and this is the April colorway. It's called Sailboats Through the Needle. I'll talk a little bit more about the Monet Club later because that is a big part of what I'm talking about for today. So that's the CC. Look at that. It's absolutely beautiful. It's like this minty, brownish taupey with the dark chocolate speckles. I told her that it reminded me of mint chocolate chip ice cream. So this is like my mint chocolate chip tea. The CC is Dusty Pink by Suburban Stitcher. And these are both fingering weight bases. And they go beautifully together. I originally had plans to pair this with her May colorway of the club, of the Monet Impressionism Club. But then when I was winding up my yarn, I had a leftover skein of the Dusty Pink sitting there. And when I put them back next to each other, I was like, oh my gosh, they go together so well. So I changed my plans. And I'm really glad I did. So again, that's the Sun and Solace Tee. And then my last whip is actually a test knit. So for those of you who don't know, I'm also a test knitter. I got into it in 2020 and I am slowing down my test knits right now. My new thing for 2021 is I'm only going to test knit for certain designers. This is one of them. This is Rachel Knits Things' newest design. It's called the In My Pocket Sweater, and it's a kid sweater. So I have 2 kids. I have a daughter who is 5 and a son who is turning 2 soon. So this is for him. And so this is, I'm knitting it top down, but she has the pattern written up for top down or bottom up, depending on your preference. So I'm knitting top down. It's going to have long sleeves. It's going to have contrast colors at the neck and the collar, and also a little pocket too. So hopefully next time I do a podcast, I'll have it done so I can show you. And this is Madeline Tosh DK in their colorway Tart, which I think is also discontinued. This was a really deep stash dive for me. Like I bought this yarn probably when I first started getting really serious about knitting in 2013, 2014. So it's really nice that I'm finally using it, but also because it's so old, Madeline Tosh, if you don't know, kind of discontinues colors and adds new colorways fairly often. Like I'd say every year or two they do that. So Tart, I think, has since been discontinued. And I'm going to pair it with some leftover Thunderstorm, also Madeline Tosh DK. as my contrast. So those are my whips. It probably doesn't seem like a lot. It's a lot for me. I personally like to only have two, maybe three whips at a time, and certainly not have most of them be sweaters. But we'll get there. I mean, a lot of them are kind of long-term projects that I don't necessarily have deadlines for. The only ones that are super urgent are the test knit, which I'll have done probably in a week or two, maybe even shorter than that, and the Sun and Solace tee that I do want to get finished. So the next thing I want to talk about is my 2021 Monet plan. So for those of you who don't know, the Red Pansy Yarn, Kelly, she has been doing this Monet Impressionisms Club since the beginning of 2021. So she selected a painting for every single month, and she dyes up a colorway every month that is based on that painting. And so I decided pretty much at the beginning of the year to commit to this club for the whole year and to make a garment out of every single month. And I partially did that to challenge myself creatively. I am someone who is usually really by the book. I like to plan things out ahead of time. It helps me feel in control. And so usually what I'm doing is I buy yarn like for a specific sweater pattern in mind, which is a really good way to pick your projects and to buy your yarn. Like, there is no shame in that. Like, I still think I should probably operate that way because it helps keep my stash smaller, if anything. But at the same time, I was starting to feel maybe a little boxed in by myself. And so when Kelly released that she was doing this club, I was really excited. Monet is one of my favorite painters ever. And so I knew that because I really love his work, that I would probably really love whatever the yarn looked like. Usually I'm not someone who buys mystery clubs either because I'm usually not sure if I'll like it or I'm disappointed because it's not what I thought it would be. And so far, Kelly's done 5 months so far and it has not disappointed at all. And it's really pushed me to go out of my comfort zone in terms of color palettes, in terms of what to imagine a pattern could be like. And as I keep going on, you'll kind of see why. So I'm going to show you what I've knit up so far of her clubs. I do plan to kind of do this throughout the whole year and to kind of have them out as timely as I can, so that hopefully by the beginning of 2022, I'll have a full Monet wardrobe that I can share with you all. I'm really excited because I'm really excited by what I've made so far with the club too. So that is the topic for today. So I'll start off with January. So January sweater. So January's painting. So this is January. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I should have been more prepared because I don't remember what painting was based on, but I will look it up and I'll stick it somewhere on here. Okay. But this is January's colorway. And the sweater pattern is French Terry by Susan Lin, or on Instagram, she's Yoni Knits. This was a test knit that I did for her, and it was one of the few times where I felt like the pattern and the colorway were a complete perfect match. Because if you look at it, it's got this brioche honeycomb stitch all over, and the way the yarn is dyed up, it's just, the whole thing glows. I had a lot of people tell me that it looked like mermaid scales. I absolutely love it. I think it was absolutely a perfect match and a perfect fit. Yeah, so this is the French Terry. It's like a sweatshirt kind of fit. It's got a very deep raglan shoulder, so be aware of that. And also just be aware, I love the way it turned out, but it was a more challenging knit for me. And I consider myself like a pretty intermediate knitter and a pretty intermediate sweater knitter. But, brioche is usually a whole nother ball game. And then to add on top of that, it's a honeycomb brioche, which is just a whole nother level of difficulty. So I highly suggest if you want to make this pattern, I think Susan has included some video tutorials, but definitely look things up on YouTube. Make sure that you've got everything under your belt. Maybe practice with a swatch or something. Definitely practice with a swatch before you kind of get started. Okay, so that's French Terry in the January colorway of the Monet Impressionisms Club. Next up was February. In February, I believe, was Givenchy or Arches Under the Flowering Bridge. And it is this green, beautiful green watercolory color. That's what I've loved so far about all of Kelly's interpretations, is that they've been so true to the painting, but still a twist on them. Like, it's not like It's not like it's a painting completely translated onto yarn, but it's so similar. It still has that watercolor effect that Monet is so well known for. So this sweater is the striped sweater by Andrea Mowry. And I modified this pattern a lot, and I'm actually really proud of how I modified this pattern. So first of all, I'm not someone who usually modifies patterns. The most I've done is just make something short sleeved is usually my usual modification, because that's easy. You just end it sooner and that's it. But for this one, so first, the striped sweater is written for sport weight yarn, and I knit this up in DK. So I actually I didn't gauge swatch, but I knew already what my gauge was for DK weight yarn on a size 7 needle. And so I just did that. And so then I did a little bit of math and I translated and figured out which size I should knit in Andrea's pattern. And I knit that up in DK instead. And so that felt really huge to me, because usually I will not do any math. I won't do anything that requires more extra work for myself. But I really wanted to knit this pattern. I really wanted to do it in DK weight. And so I'm really proud of myself for doing that. Andrew's pattern also has a stripe smaller. So instead of, what I did instead was that my main color, this Monet, the February Club color, I knit it 3 stripes wide on Andrew's pattern, and then the CC, which is also the red pansy, this is her Dove colorway, I knit 2 stripes wide. So they're a little bit not completely, you know, symmetrical, I guess, stripes. You know, the main color is a little wider than the contrast color, but you know, it's not such a huge difference that it distracts you. If anything, it just really shows off both colorways pretty well, I think. And I modified it to kind of elbow length sleeves, I guess, and I made the sleeves a little bit, I didn't really decrease the sleeves much because I wanted that kind of flowy feeling to go with the yarn and with the rest of the pattern. March's colorway was from the painting Woman with a Parasol, and I knitted up for Jessie May's Cozy Classic Raglan. And so you can see this. I didn't do anything special for it. The colorway itself is so variegated. I did alternate the skeins a little bit, kind of depending on what it looked like was coming up next, trying to like minimize any pooling. I think if anything, it striped a tiny bit and kind of pulled a little bit, but I'm okay with it. It's not like a huge amount of pooling or anything like that. And the sleeves kind of ended up striping as well, which is kind of a cool effect. But I really loved March's colorway too, especially all these little kind of autumnal, summery, springy speckles that are speckled throughout. And I thought this one was really a great translation of a painting also. And the Cozy Classic Raglan, if you never knit before, it's a really well-written pattern. It was my first Jessie May pattern I've done. It won't be my last. I have a lot of other Jessie May patterns planned to knit up. But what I loved about it was that, you know, I've done several raglan sweaters already, but this one was unique in how the raglan was worked. You can see that single stitch kind of running through. It's a really cool effect. It looks really polished and really elegant, and I really love that. So that is March's. I showed you April's already, but I'll show you again. So April's painting was Sailboats Behind the Needle. And that is this colorway right here. I really love this one. This one was probably the one that was most out of my comfort zone so far, because the painting itself, if you haven't seen it before, it's kind of like tan and taupey and just like colors I don't normally work with. I normally work with very cool tones, nothing super warm or anything like that. And so I was a little nervous about it. I was worried that I was going to get something where I wasn't quite sure if I would like it that much, but I really actually like super loved it, and I'm loving it even more as I keep working it up. I think Kelly's interpretation of it was absolutely beautiful. It goes really well with all the other colorways that have come out so far. And then I just got May's colorway in the mail yesterday. So May's painting is based on Soleil Levant, and here it is. It is so beautiful. It's got little orangey speckles all over. It's got this teal orangey bluish base running through. I have seen pictures of it on her DK base. I got these in fingering. I have seen pictures of it on her DK base, and it's a little, the color's not as subtle on the DK base. It's more subtle on the fingering base, and that's just kind of the way the dye works out. and how the yarn accepts the dye, but I kind of love this. I really love how it looks. And so my plans for it right now are to knit it up as an open edge tee. That pattern's by Jessie May. It was just released recently. But I think that this will look really beautiful worked up into that tee pattern. Yeah, just give you another look at that. Yeah. So yeah, that's May's colorway. I believe Kelly has probably just opened the pre-orders for June's club. So if you haven't seen any of it, go check out her work. I really love her yarn. Kelly's a really good friend of mine as well. But I really love her yarn and the way she dyes and her color palettes. So go support her if you haven't before and if you really love it. If you missed out on any of the previous clubs and you really wanted any of them, she is going to do a pre-order later in the summer for all the previous club colorways that people have missed out on. So keep an eye out for that too. So yeah, so that's my 2021 Monet plan, is to knit up every month as it goes along. Hopefully as this podcast goes along, I'll bring you along that journey with me and kind of show off, each month's colorways, what I'm making with it, show off my whips with it. And hopefully by 2022, I'll have a whole wardrobe. We're going to do a whole episode dedicated to it. That's my plan. Yeah, so that is it for the knitting content for today's podcast. And I'm going to try it so that every podcast has kind of a theme to it. I'm hoping the next video to show you my 2021 makes so far, so all my non-Monet FOs so far. And so we're going to wrap up this video. I'm just going to talk to you about the wellness tip for this week. So my wellness tip for you this week is, if you're someone who suffers from like aches and pains or cramping when you're knitting or crocheting for a really long time, one of the tips I like to do and to give people is to just have different kinds of projects on your needles. And this is where having a few whips is a good thing. I know some people are monogamous knitters, and if you are, that's fine. I'm not telling you you can't be a monogamous knitter. But if you are someone who does have several whips on the needles at a time, one thing you can do is try to have whips with different needle sizes. So for example, for me, I had been working a lot on that test knit, the In My Pocket sweater, and that is a DK weight, but it's a slightly tighter gauge, mainly because kids sweaters and kid garments are usually a tighter gauge to stand up to more of the wear and tear that kids kind of put on their clothes. And so I've been finding that my tension is a little tighter than usual when I'm knitting, and so I am getting some, hand aches and cramping a little bit once in a while if I work on it too long. So instead, what I've been doing is, the minute I feel my hands starting to get tired or crampy or achy, I will switch to a different whip. I'll switch to a different whip where maybe the needle size is a little bit larger or the gauge is a little bit different, just to give my hands a break. Because whether you notice or not, the way you hold your knitting or your crocheting really changes a little bit depending on how big of a needle you're using, how the weight of the yarn you're using as well. And so sometimes changing up those things can really help loosen the tension you're putting through your hands, and it can alter the way you're holding things and give a break to the muscles that are feeling a lot of the stress, so that you're still feeling productive and still feeling like you're working on your whips, and not having to like put things aside and completely rest with your knitting or crocheting. But it's not going to overstrain your muscles, if that makes sense. So that's why I usually have like a pair of socks on the needles, even if it takes me months to work them up. At least if my hands are getting tired from the constant sweater knitting or what have you, I can switch to, my size 1, size 0 needles for a break. And then, if my hands are getting tired from holding size 0, size 1 needles really tightly, I can switch to my size 6 through 8 needles with my sweaters to kind of give my hands a bit of a break. So that's a tip for this week. Think about having different kinds of projects on your needles, or different weights, different needle sizes, what have you, so that you can continue crafting but not get to the point where you end up with a repetitive overuse injury, and that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I'm sorry if I'm a little rambly. I'm still getting used to speaking in front of a camera. That's why my reels are usually silent. Well, that's why my reels are silent, so that I'm not stumbling over my words. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed learning more about me, learning about my knitting a little bit. Please, drop me a comment below. Tell me about yourself, where you're from, maybe what you'd like to see in the future. And I'll talk to you guys soon. All right, thanks. Bye.